The Doom That Came to Sarnath by H.P. Lovecraft. Okay, here we go. There is in the land of Nod a vast still lake, that which is fed by no other, neither stream no other stream which flows. 10,000s of years ago there stood by its shore the mighty city of Sarnath. But Sarnath stands no more. It is told that in the immemorial years of time once forgotten, when the world was young, before ever the men of Sarnath came to its lands, in the lands of Nod, another city, it stood beside the lake, the grey stone city of Ib, which was of old as old was and as old as the lake itself, much older than that perhaps, and people with beings not pleasing to behold, that it within lied. Very odd and ugly were these dark beings, as indeed are most beings in a world yet incoherent and inchoate, and rudely fashioned thusly. It is written on the brick of cylinders of Cadal Eltharon that the beings of Ib were in hue of green, dark as the lake's most Stygian depths, and the mists that rise above it, that they had bulging eyes protruding with dark black flabby lips and curious ears, and with their faces they spoke of nothing, for they had no voice other than guttural protrusions of sound. It was also written that they were descended of one night demon from the moon in a mist. They descended in vast a still lake and grey stone city of Ib. However, this may not be uncertain or not so, that they worshipped this sea green stone, an idol chiseled in the likeness of Bukrug, a great water lizard with many horns and feet, before which they danced horribly in a rhythmous uproar of foul out of tune music, for the moon was gibbous in its height, and it's written in the papyrus of Ilmerek that there one day discovered fire, and thereafter kindled flames of many ceremonial blood flame sacrifices. But not much is written of these insipid beings, because they lived in very ancient times and very primal, when and man was yet young, knowing very little of these ancient and pathetic beings. After many eons later, men came to the land of Nar. A dark shepherd did, did silence, did pass. Pale shepherd folk with their fleecy flocks who built their Thra, their Ilnarek, and Calderathon on the winding river of Ai. And certain tribes more hardy than the rest pushed onto the border onto the lake and built the Sarnath at the spot where the precious metals betwixt one another in various splendor and abundance were thusly found uprooted from the earth. Not far from the grey city of Ib did the wandering tribes lay to the first stones of the Sarnath, and the beings of a horrid dark and black and brown and green and yellow green beings of Ib. They marveled greatly at the white man who came to their shores. But then, with their marveling was mixed with hate, for they thought it was not the meat of beings superior with intentions kindly should walk amongst about this world men of dusk. Uh, uh, Nor did they like the strange sculptures of white beauty, the great monoliths they carved in their foreign black lands of Ib, in their blackness, greenness, and darkness. For those sculptures were terrible to them, but divine and white in antiquity for of the formation of Sarnath by the white men who thusly found it. Why these beings would such hate such sculptures which lingered late so late in the world in their eyes? The coming of the white men was something they could not tell, but filled with such hate they had in their hearts for him. Nar is very still and remote and far from us in many a land. They bring with this message more and this story eloquent allegories brought forth within a dream. As the men of Sarnath beheld more of these grotesque black beings, and uh, also the ones of gray, green, and and brown of hue, hate between the tribes and races and species thusly grew. And it was not less because they found these beings weak, soft, or jelly to the touch of the stones and spears the white man had fashioned. So one day the young warriors, the sling, it was just because the races did not find one or the other too beholden before both were insanely loyal to their tribes. So one day the young warriors, the slingers and the spearmen, the archers and bowmen marched against the Ib and slew all uh, the slew all uh, uh, slew all the needy black and terrible creatures of Ib, whether they be black, green, or brown, and each inhabitant mm, fell upon them a blackest, bloodiest red of death, covered thoroughly in blood, pushing of their dead, ugly, queer bodies into the lake, their corpses floating amongst the spears, is injected into their bodies, the swords and the other weapons fashioned by the white man, killing all of the black, brown, and green creatures, all these horrid monstrosities. They cast their corpses deeply into the lake, wondering what to build from the recesses of the residue of their shattered bodies, corpses, and the labor of how much they've killed to make of in their land of stone and lumber and timber to wrought and brought beautiful things fashioned in eye of white man from afar as they must have been, since there is not like them here in all their lands of Nod. Thus of very ancient city was Ib, and nothing spared was saved of the dark people except for their stones, chiseled now in the likeness of no longer Bokrog the water lizard, but now in the semblance of young warriors, wizards, mages, and healers, sculptors, and scientists of the great white race that thusly invaded this savage land. These young warriors took back with them these treasures, many of them, and fashioned even more such sculptures of the one just thusly described. The old gods of the people have been destroyed, and so have their people, and now white and beautiful things reign in the land of Nar, and thusly called Sarnath, under its new appointed uh, uh, monarchy. But on thine night that this was set upon, in the temple of a terrible thing where these black things once congregated, um, something bleak, black, and terrible must have happened. For weird lights were seen over the lake, and in its morning people found the idol gone. There was the jewel of the idol gone, and from the high priest Taranish lying dead as the stone was clutched into his it was Taranish lying dead as the some fear they found this unspeakable. And before he died, Taranish had scrawled upon the altar of a chrysolite with the coarse, shaky strokes of the sign of doom. After Taranish were there many high priests in Sarnath. Never was the sea green stone in the that was ripped from the idol found again. And many centuries came and went, wherein Sarnath proposed exceedingly, so its priests and old women remembered what Taranish scrawled upon thine altar. Betwixt upon Sarnath and the city of Ilnarek rose a caravan route, and the precious metals from the earth were thusly in abundance exchanged for other metals and other more exotic metals, cloths and fish and jewels and books and tools for artificers and other men of trade to make things of luxury even more so, and dwell upon great lavish did the people of Sarnath. for great learning mm, mm, of the white people of Sarnath, who thusly fashioned a society of greatness where there has once been a black society of squalor. Now, the white society, excellent, resplendent, perfect, beyond human, immaculate conception of the word, even perfection, does it shape. The wonder of the world it was, a pride of all mankind. Sarnath was the magnificent, the polished jewel of all civilization. 300 cubits of every single gem um, had sparkled with such illustrious beauty. The men drove so many things so many beasts of burden and to of different types with their exotic chariots as they pass up by the streets. They created full stadium coliseums and where battles continued, and they made great civilizations. In Sarnath, there were 50 streets from the gates where caravans had intersecting pavements and they carried all kinds of exotic animals, from elephants trodden with in bronze and in silver tusks, and to horses of such splendor and barding that none could surpass. The houses of Sarnes were glazed with brick and marble, chalcedony and uh, and malachite, each of them having its wielded garden and a crystal lakelet. A strange art was building. There were no ugly, oily houses in each any city like of the terrible black city of Ib that it once was. Uh, there were many scholars of Thra and Ilnarek and Caldarathon marveled upon the shining domes where they had mounted their glorious white civilization on the dead civilization of the black and evil, terrible things of Id. Uh, but the more marvelous still were palaces and temples in the gardens made by Zokar the Olden King. There were many palaces, at least of which were mightier than the Thrall Ilnarek or Kaldarathon. So high were they that once within them someone might fancy himself beneath only under the sky, when lighted with torches, depths of the oil of Dothor, with the walls hewed vast paintings and sculptures of kings and armies and splendor and noble ideals, inspiring the stupefying splendor of one to truly behold the beholder within the beholder. Many were there the designs upon the beauty and nobility, and in the most places floors were of mosaic, beryl, lapis lazuli, and even ruby. Many galleries and many amphitheaters. There were lions and men and elephant battled upon internal colosseums for the curiosity of kings. Lofty and amazing were 17 tower-like temples of Sarnath, fashioned of bright multicolored stone not known elsewhere. Full thousand cubits of high marble wall stood the greatest among them, and the high priest dwelt within temples of such magnificence and opulence scarce less any king could dream. On the ground there were halls vast, splendid as those palaces which gathered throngs of worshippers like Zokalar and Tamash and Loban, the chief gods of the Sarnath folk, who now they call him, whose incense enveloped shrines were now thrones of the monarchs, not like the icons of other gods of Zokalar and Tamash, for so close were to their lives that they might swear the graceful bearded gods themselves, with their pale white skin on their ivory thrones, came up from these shining pillars of light from whence they he stood over the tower chamber where from high priests look upon the city and plains and take uh, deep thoughts day by day by cryptic moon and starlight and moonlight and lake's reflection of sun and moon and their reflections in that lake, thy night and day. Here was done the very beginning, a secret ancient rite in the destination of Bokrog. Here was done the detestation of Bokrog. The detestation of Bokrog, the water lizard, the one that was the elder, that was the black uh, water lizard god of the creatures of it. Remember was what was born on its death, doom scrawled by Taranish, chrysolite red, doom, doom. We scroll for doom. Wonderful likewise were the gardens made by Zelkar the olden king, the Sarnath where they lie, and covering a great space encircling a high wall. Okay, so we'll stop here for now. There's actually a lot long. It's a lot longer than I remember. I just wanted to get to the gist of the story. It's like we're still very early in the story. We're not. It's too much description. Let's go back into where do we go? Taranishi. Okay, so just continue. Let's continue. Okay. Where did we leave off? Shit. Nobles feast. Okay, we're getting close to what it matters. Okay, it's almost over. Yeah, it's over. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, wonderful. Likewise, were the gardens made by Zokar, the olden king. In the center of the Sarnath they lie, covering a great space encircled by a high wall. Um, and they were surmounted by heavy dome of glass and thusly applied a uh, uh, um, supports of marble, through which shone the light. Supports. Um, uh, a glass dome uh, with hinges of marble, through which shone the sun and its moon and stars and planets, which then were clear and hung in fulgent image of the sun and the moon and the stars. The planets which were not entirely clear. In summer, and the gardens were cooled with fresh odorous breezes skillfully wafted by fans, wafted thoroughly in passage of time to aromatic effect achieve in best possible efficiency and assets. In winter, they were heated with concealed fires. In those gardens, it was always spring. There were little streams over red pebbles dividing beads and meads of golden green beads and hues and multitudes of bridges. Many were the waterfalls in the courses and many in the lakelets, and shrines and temples stood tall against the white man's gods, who have conquered now this once black and horrid place called Ib. Each year there was a celebrated feast in Sarnath, and it would celebrate the destruction of the black things of Ib, at which time wine, song, dancing, and merriment of every kind abounded in great abundance, of course. Great honors then there were paid to the shades of those who had annihilated the black and vile ancient beings that only memory dances to. The elder gods destroyed, now elder gods of vile subrace, subhuman, ib creatures, and their failed gods, now mocked, annihilated. The dancers danced, and the lutanists crowned with them roses of garnets for the dead enemies and for the victory of the white blessed man. And the kings now would look out over the lake, curse the bones of the dead, and lay beneath at the high priest's feet like those festivals. There had been descended amongst them queer tales of how the sea green icon had vanished, and its um, the icon being the jewel left over from the statue, and how Taranish had died from a fear of not his own personal, but a fear left of warning, not so much of curses, not so much of gods, but of abandonment of principle. And they said that from their high tower, they many years have passed, calamity has been avoided by priests, and each each and thusly everything remembered our victories were good, spoke this people of Sarnath, and thusly they must keep this tradition going. Yet things start to change. Gorgeous beyond thought was the feast. Uh, every year they'd celebrate the destroying of year. Year after year, the destroying of Ib would be celebrated, and this was good. Though slow, slowly they start to forget about the threat. They slowly start to forget who they are. Before the marble walls, they would appointed night by pavilions pitched with the princes and tents of and tenants of travelers, shores of resound with song, happy revelers with the banquet hall reclined in Nargisai, the king, drunken with ancient succulent wine from the vaults of conquered Pnathenib, surrounded by feasting nobles and hurrying slaves. There were eaten many strange delicacies that night, peacocks and pheasants and other things, things from the middle center and the deepest part of the oceans, delicate young goats freshly slaughtered from the distant hills of Implan, heels of camels from the Besnak desert, nuts and spices from Siderian groves, and the pearls from the whitewashed Matal dissolved the vinegar of Thra. The sauces were of untold and immeasurable, prepared by the most subtlest and skilled and most intense and passionate cooks of all, which blended their craft to the utmost greatest is portent of quality, nor and suited to the palace and palate of every feaster, of every feaster, sorry, feeder, every feaster. I didn't see the S. That was like feeder, it was feeder. Every feaster, um, to the palate of every feaster. Uh, uh, palate of every feaster. Sorry, palate. I'm thinking palate. Now I'm thinking palate is palace. Uh, but most prized of all of these viands were the great fishes from the lake, the local fish, not of the sea, but of the lake, served up in golden platters with rubies and diamonds, uh, 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 in which were encrusted within the silver. Whilst the kings and the nobles feasted on the palace, they viewed the crowning dish as it was awaited them on golden platters. Others feasted elsewhere in the tower, in the great hall, and even in the temples of their gods, not the old ones. So this was mockery of their own gods, making merry too much. In the shadows, some darkness rises. And it was the high priest of Ganai who saw the first dark shadows that descended from the gibbous moon into the lake. The damnable green mists that arose from that lake to meet the moon and shroud them in sinister haze of towers with domes faded of Sarnath. And therefore, those in the towers and without the wall and will to behold strange lights in the hour of the lights on the water and the towers and the water towers and saw how the great walk of Akorian was wont rear high above its near shore, almost submerged, and a fear grew vaguely yet softly and swiftly. So did the princes of Ilnarak and Forrokol, folded in tents of the pavilions, departed for the river Ai, though they scarce knew the reason of their departing. Then, close to the hour of midnight, all bronze gates, blackened with darkness and death, and they emptied forth, frenzied throng of blackened pain. So all these visiting princes and travelers were killed, for the faces of this throng was writ a madness born of horror unending, unendurable. Their tongues were words so terrible that no hearer paused for proof. Men whose eyes were wild, feared, shrieked, aloud, sighed, aloft, with pleasure, pain, torment, bloody eyes, they killed each other. There were no more terrible black creatures of him, but things started to change. These men, they killed each other, though they were not black, of Ord or of him. They killed each other, destroying each other like jackals feasting at one another. Then, close to the hour of midnight, their corpses started to change. Their forms started to have black lips, flabby, ugly, flat nose, and started resembling the people of Ib, which they've killed centuries, more than centuries, more than millennia ago. Though they were not Ibs themselves, people, they were not the black creatures of Ib. They became like that. They forgot who they were because they gave in to too much fear, pain, and pleasure in too much excess. They forgot who they are, and buried in stone, not even the rushes would sing their songs, nor the thrushes. So never again was there a land left like Sarnath once of old. Now never again was there a land like Ib, only a dead wasteland, where beautiful, handsome white men and their female maidens with or blue-green or amber eyes may never set eyes upon, when maidens of fair yellow hair will never see again this once pride of all mankind, where everything is wrong. Now a wasteland dead of all, with nothing left, throughout the land of no. Okay, so that was the story, H.P. Lovecraft's story, his famous story of the doom that came from Sarnath. It is a warning to never forget who you are and always remember your race. You know, because if you forget about who your enemies are and who your friends are, you become too cloaked in either pleasure or pain. If all you do is, in the end, they got too happy and the rest of them got too dissat. If you're too much in pleasure or too much in pain, you become a threat to your people. And at the end, even though they never physically became, they were never black, like the creatures of Abe or green. When their corpses died, their corpses started that reflect the people that they killed. So this is the allegory that it says you never forget who you are, because you might become the monster you see destroy. This is the famous story of Howard Lovecraft. He said it's this message is to preserve your racial purity and hate your enemies, love your people, but don't get too caught in pleasure or victory. Thusly, don't get too caught in hatred and stuff, because then you start hating your own people and you become dangerous to your own people. So this is the excess of pain and suffering, and too much negativity, and the excess of pleasure and happiness, and too much mirth and enjoyment, and self indulgence. This is the brilliance of Lovecraft. Thank